Hello friends, bienvenidos. My name is Jen, aka Jen Colotero on social media, your local witchy friend and intuitive guide through the occult. As always, my lovely husband and co-host is David, aka Premier Pools on social media.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Today, Genesis is going to explain Mercury Retrograde.
Welcome to the show, grab a chair, make yourself at home. Jen's got stories to share, you'll never feel alone.
So I've been looking forward to this episode for a while. I feel like Mercury retrograde is one of the first transits that I started studying about, and also a transit that is very misunderstood. I'm sure that you've heard about Mercury retrograde even before I really started delving into astrology, correct?
I've literally just only heard the term. I don't know too much about it other than, I feel like it's kind of like a buzzword and just the memes, right? So you hear like Mercury Gatorade or my Mercury is in the microwave, but I think that's literally the extent. I feel like a lot of the subjects that we do, I have a general understanding or like I kind of get it. This is the first one where I think I'm going in completely blind. I've heard the term. I know from some of our previous episodes what retrograde is, but apart from that, I have no idea, what it is. But why is this so hot? I mean, there's what, 8 planets, 9 planets if you don't count Pluto. Like, I never really hear too much of like Jupiter retrograde or Saturn retrograde. Like, why is Mercury retrograde such a big deal?
Yeah, so Mercury retrograde is really hot because it happens the most often. So Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It has the fastest rotation, so it'll complete a lap around the sun, if you will, the fastest. Therefore, it will go into retrograde more often.
You
So
said lap around the sun. Okay, so it takes us 365 days to go around the sun. How long does it take Mercury?
I don't know exactly,
Mm.
but I just know that the closer you are to the sun, the faster your lap will be. So, like, Venus is faster than us, but Mars is slower than us.
Got it.
So, Mercury is the closest, so its lap is going to be the fastest. We go into
Oh,
Mercury.
sorry, I looked it up. It's 88 days. So that's, what, about a third of us?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
approximately.
Okay.
So, Mercury goes into that tracks because Mercury goes into retrograde about 3 times a year.
Yeah.
So if it's 3 times faster, yeah, that makes sense. But yes, so because it goes into retrograde the most often, that's why like you hear so much about it because it just happens so often. So Mercury retrograde itself lasts about 3 weeks, but then there is something called a pre and post shadow.
Okay.
So we talked to
And just a quick refresher. What is a retrograde again? That means when it looks like the planet is going in reverse, correct?
Yes, so scientifically speaking, a retrograde is the optical illusion that a planet is moving backwards.
Okay.
But in astrology, it means that the energy is not optimized. So,
Hmm.
whatever that planet controls that is going in retrograde, that energy will go sideways. So, for example, Mercury retrograde, Mercury is communication. So, anything having to do with communication will not be in its prime right now.
Okay. Isn't Mercury the god of war, right? Or it comes from that root?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but actually now I'm second guessing myself. I don't really know like all the Greek gods and goddesses, just certain ones.
Yeah.
So that is a good question.
I'll look it up while you let us know what Mercury retrograde is.
Yes, so there is the pre and post shadow. So that's when a planet starts to, it looks like it's slowing down. So a planet has a constant speed, but when it goes into the shadow period, it starts to slow down.
God.
So then that means that the energy is starting to shift from optimal to not as optimal. And which once we reach retrograde, it's at its peak non-optimal state.
Okay.
I don't want to say it's worst state, but it's like most unoptimal time.
Got it. Mercury wasn't a god, and I knew this. He's the messenger. He's the one that had the wings on his feet.
I was like, that makes sense because communication, but at the same time, I'm not sure.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
yes.
So basically, yeah, he's a messenger. That's why it's communication.
Yes. Okay, that makes sense. Perfect. So, yes. So there's a pre-shadow and a post-shadow. So for this retrograde specifically, the pre-shadow, when Mercury looked like it was slowing down, and when the energy started shifting to less optimal, started November 25th. We reach retrograde, full retrograde status, December 13th, when this episode is going to drop.
Ooh, okay. We're dropping the Mercury retrograde on the Mercury retrograde.
Yep. I timed that.
That's perfect. Now, when you say pre-shadow and post-shadow, are those actual visual things we can see? Or is that just what it's called?
Yes, those are things that you can see. I mean, like, you can't see it, but if you were, like, an astronomer that was tracking, like, distance, you could probably see, hey, it's moving a little more slowly.
Okay, so, like, with a telescope, we would be able to observe it.
I mean, can you see a planet moving through a telescope? Like, is it quantifiable? I think is your question. Yes, it's quantifiable.
Got it, okay.
Yes.
And I think you can see a planet moving, no?
I mean, I don't think so because technically the moon moves really fast and you don't see it like moving with your naked eye unless it's an eclipse.
I guess that's true, yeah.
You see it moving through the day, but like if you stare at it for 10 minutes, it's gonna be still. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then I guess technically we have to take into account like our rotation too. So, okay.
So I think the root of your question is it quantifiable?
Yes.
Scientifically, yes. Or mathematically, yes, it is. Okay. So retrograde, peak retrograde is December 13th through January 1st, which is very interesting timing.
Okay.
And then from there, the post shadow, when we're going to feel a little bit of a lift of this retrograde energy, but we're not out of the woods yet, will continue until January 20th, and that's when it ends.
Got it. So you said it affects communication. So like, does it just affect communication? So basically like, be careful what you say or do during that time? Or is it like, it affects other stuff?
It affects communication, travel, and news.
Okay.
So, very broad topic. So, because we're in the age of the internet, it could affect software. It could affect, you might see more news sources maybe coming out with like fake news or rushing to a story and then having to like backtrack and correct. Miscommunication, personally, you might have more like arguments or misunderstandings. Exes also notoriously pop up during this time because we have less of a filter during Mercury retrograde, and they're like, you know what, it is a good time to reach back out, and so people are just feeling a little more bold.
It's the junk texting of the planetary systems, basically.
Yeah, that and Venus retrograde too. Okay. But that's more love. But yeah, anyway. Emails can get lost, mail can get lost, travel plans might be a little frantic. Yeah, so I could talk a little bit more in the example session later, like what I'm doing right now to sort of prepare, but yes.
I wonder if that also, I mean, I know the holidays are hard, but like, I wonder if adding the Mercury retrograde to itself makes it harder, right? Because you said the times are between what? December 13th to what? January
1st.
Oh, so that hits like all of Christmas, all winter holidays, and the New Year, huh?
When was Thanksgiving? Because I wonder if the shadow affected Thanksgiving too.
The shadow, I'm sorry, Thanksgiving was November. It was earlier this year, I felt. It was like November, like early 20s, I think. Right? It's the 4th, yeah, it was November 23rd this year.
Yeah, so the shadow started November 25th.
Okay, so just missed it.
We just missed it, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, physical correspondence, electronic correspondence could get lost. Yeah, a lot to do with communication and planning can go sideways right now.
Got it. Now, so the solar system, how it works, right, is we have our own rotation, which is a day, 24 hours. We have the rotation around kind of the sun, which we talked about is 88 days. So we're, I guess, rotating in tandem around the sun together, but is there different like stages where we are in like that rotation that affects that Mercury retrograde? Or like different degrees, or is it just kind of the same every time there's a rotation?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, are all Mercury retrogrades the same?
Yeah,
And
basically.
the answer is no.
Okay.
So, Mercury retrograde, so remember, astrology is like a big clock. So
Yes.
everything is always in a different like hour and minute, if you will.
And that's what I was yeah, that's what I was asking. So like we picture the sun is at the center, right?
Yeah.
And then like just for to simplify it, like while we're doing our daily rotation around the sun, there's like a different like time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Side note. This is really amusing because I think this is like the most I've ever been like, what did he say? So yeah.
That's our communication messing up. Like we're talking about Mercury retrograde, and Mercury is like, I'm gonna test you right now.
Yeah, that's really funny because this is the first time that I'm like, huh? Not the first time, but like the most that I've been like, what? But
I think you're getting the questions though, because I'm asking them, but yeah, you're hitting on what I'm asking. But it is kind of funny that the communication fuck ups are happening on the Mercury retrograde episode.
yeah, and we've been more blatantly like Googling stuff. Like I should have remembered that Mercury was the messenger, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Interesting. Okay.
blame it on retrograde. But anyway, yeah, so retrogrades do happen in different signs. So right now, this retrograde is going to start at 8 degrees Capricorn.
Okay. So what does that mean?
So that means that Mercury is in the part of the sky, if you will, that Capricorn controls. So that means that it's going to this retrograde is going to embody sort of the less pleasant aspects of Capricorn, if you will.
And what are some aspects of Capricorn?
So Capricorn is very like organized boss man of the zodiac. However, in its like detriment or less favorable aspects, it could come off as like bossy, authoritarian, and cuz I said so. So more like argumentative.
Got it.
So
So if your boss is extra spicy during this time, you can blame it on the retrograde.
yeah, and it's also an earth sign, and earth signs are notorious for like being stubborn as well as air signs, but Capricorn is an earth sign, so we might have more people just digging in their heels. I'm right, you're wrong. But this affects everyone differently too. So like for example, I have Mars in Libra at 7 degrees, which is about 89 degrees away from where this retrograde is starting. So that creates a square. Long story short, that's a negative aspect for me. And this affects my first and my fourth house. So the relationship between these two things means that I might be struggling with some family dynamics during this time.
Oh,
It affects my sense of self versus my family, which is really interesting because some things have sort of started to come up. But anyway, so yeah, it's interesting. It'll affect everyone differently versus like, let's say my Mars was in my 7th house, which is relationships, and 4th house is family. It might affect like family planning or like how we are planning on guiding ourselves or our relationship together with our family. Like it really depends on how Mercury is playing off of your natal astrology.
Interesting. What about me? How does it affect me?
I have to look at your chart real quick. I have my chart memorized like the back of my hand, so
You should have mine.
I know.
Speaking of communication.
I know. I've met some people that are super talented that remember like a million people's birth charts just like that. I am not that talented.
So you're going off. Okay, but I feel like you've alluded to my birth charts multiple times on and off the podcast. So
yeah, but there are certain aspects that are easier to remember than others.
got
Like
it.
I remember your big 3, but like that's about it.
I see. Yeah, which okay, we've talked about in the past. So why maybe you look that up with the retrogrades? The biggest ones that affect us as humans are Mercury and Saturn. Is there other ones?
No, all of them affect us in
Oh, they
different
do.
ways. Yes.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's just remembering that like there are personal planets and then there are generational planets.
Yes.
So, but even generational planets when they go retrograde can affect all of us in the macro and in the micro. So like
And then
every
we talked about Pluto, right? That's like a once in a lifetime, correct? Or even missed by a lifetime.
I don't know if it's once in a lifetime per se. I have to double check, but it's not as often as Mercury. It's the least often to happen,
Which
basically.
is Venus the one that we only get like once per lifetime? Is it Venus retrograde or Saturn? Yeah, Venus, right?
So I don't. It's not retrogrades. It's like actual completion. So
Okay.
so
Or
like
Saturn return, is that different than a retrograde?
yes. So returns are that it completes a lap at a certain point.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. So what you're probably thinking about with like once in a lifetime is that a Pluto return. That's once in a lifetime.
Got it.
Because a Pluto year, if you will, that's a return is basically a year, a lap around the sun. That's like 200 something years.
Got it. And then the other thing is, I know we have talked about like hot topics in, just the zeitgeist or pop culture. I think the last time we talked about like hot metaphysical stuff, it was like the twin flames. Why is Mercury retrograde so like hot? Like, why is it such a like buzz term right now? Is it just because? Yeah, I mean, why? I feel like I hear it all the time, especially from like
Yeah,
astrology girls.
there is like a new age revival and an interest in tarot and astrology. I feel like it really happened in the 90s, 2000s, and then it died a little bit in the 2010s, and now it's coming back. So I feel like it ebbs and flows in the collective sort of Western consciousness, if you will. For some people, it doesn't go away, for other people, it's a fad.
Yeah.
So, I feel like it's hot right now because a lot of people are into this because it's trendy, but we'll see in like 5-10 years who drops off and who stays. Not to like sound like a gatekeeper,
Yeah.
like, like I'm a real one, but it's just, and it's okay if people try it and it's not for them, but yeah.
I just like my minimal thoughts on this because really, honestly, for this episode, it was more open to hearing than really giving my opinion because I didn't really know what Mercury retrograde was. Just kind of have the same thoughts I did as in the moon episode, right? Like, I'm sure there is some connection to us as humans. But Mercury is really far away, like we talked about in previous episodes, right? Like, the moon itself is almost 300,000 miles, and Mercury is the closest to the sun. So, scientifically speaking, I don't really think it would have an effect on us. Like, with the moon, I can kind of maybe think of some quantifiable things, but with basically any planet, even Mars, I think even Mars is far enough that I don't really think it has any effect on us. I know all our well, like, I could be wrong because I think everything has gravitational effect on us. So Mercury probably has some gravitational effect, not as much as the sun. But I would be curious to see if like Mercury wasn't a planet, like how things would change.
I feel like a lot of this is playing off of our astrology episode because I talked a lot about Mercury retrograde there. But at this point, I've shown you like enough stuff that happens around Mercury retrograde. Like, isn't it at the very least interesting? Like,
yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think the fact that it's the one that happens the most probably, like I said, I like it. I like to look at data points and quantifiable things, and since it is something that happens around 3 times a year, it's a little easier to maybe like study or see. But miscommunications, family issues, those are also very broad, universal human things, right? That we're going to be going through at all times. So like I mentioned earlier, the holidays are stressful, and it just so happens that Mercury retrograde is during the holidays, like chicken egg type situation, right?
I've got a data point for you right here. Most of the bullshit in my life has been during Mercury retrograde. So Take that however you want it.
I'll take it as anecdotal. But no, I mean, still very interesting, right? I think it's really cool to, just have a different perspective, especially when it lines up to the cosmos. We talk a lot about space and just kind of what's out there. I've realized, which is cool because I'm personally like super fascinated by space. I think it's the great unknown, even though we haven't even explored our oceans. But it's just so cool to think what's out there, and it's really nice putting another perspective of like, the celestial bodies have an influence on us as humans. So, I mean, I can vibe with that for sure.
Yeah. I think Mercury retrograde gets a bad rap. It's not always
How
bad.
how so though? Bad rap isn't what, like people think it's not good, or what do you mean?
Yeah, when people hear Mercury retrograde's coming up, and this still happens to me, like at first it's like, oh shit, here we go again. But something I will say is that this is really just an energy forecast. Like, if
Mm,
it's raining or if it's a rainy season, are you immediately going to be like, everything's going to shit? Maybe if you're a driver in LA, because you know that there's always going to be car accidents. But it's really just like, if you have your rain boots, if you have your raincoat, if you have your umbrella, you're going to be fine.
correct.
So that's very much how I see retrogrades. You really just have to prepare and then you'll survive it. That's what I tell myself.
Yeah. So when was the last Mercury retrograde?
August 23rd to September 15th. And
Ooh,
I'm laughing because this is when we had COVID.
that's right. Yeah, that is right. We had COVID during that time. And then so August, September, I feel like we did a lot. So not end of July, beginning of July, we were in LA and it was fun but hectic. August is our birthdays. And then yeah, we did get COVID. So yeah, I mean, if we want to connect some personal life points, it was COVID during Mercury retrograde, which based on the conversation and what I've learned, it definitely tracks, right?
Yeah, this one had me cracking up when I saw that date. And then the one before that was April 21st to May 14th.
April, I don't remember what I was doing in April, so maybe it didn't affect me as much then. Um, okay, so tell us a little bit about some personal experiences you've had with Mercury retrograde, and then what are some things our listeners can do to prepare for Mercury retrograde? Because it sounds like it's something that's worth prepping for.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said in the astrology episode, um it was the only time in my life I've ever been like pushed out of a job, and not because of performance, but because, long story short, I was supposed to be remote and then they said, just kidding, we don't want everyone remote, but you already bought your house, so I don't know what to tell you.
Okay.
Um and then when we were trying to move and close the deal on our house, and then the Russian hackers took down Microsoft worldwide. Um, that time that we rented a Silverado, and then we like,
Shout out Chevy.
and then I don't want to say severely damaged it, but we did damage it. But luckily, it didn't affect anything because we got the extra insurance because I knew it was retrograde.
Well, okay. Let's clarify for the listeners because they're gonna think we put it in a like demolition derby. Which, okay,
Might as well.
one of the things was definitely our fault. So I think we had a cracked windshield, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we did a road trip from California to Colorado, and we got like Genesis said, a Chevy Silverado, which was like really nice. I remember it was like fully loaded and it was great. But then we ended up paying more for the insurance than the actual rental. And I'd always heard like the insurance is like a sucker's thing, right? And I also think with my personal insurance, I think I had rental coverage, but I didn't want to risk it. So I think we were like, yeah, fuck it, like we'll just get it. I was a little like, damn, like, till this day I remember it was $800 for that damn insurance, because I think it was like something like $80 per day, and we were gone for a bit. So I remember it was super freaking expensive. The rental itself wasn't that expensive, and I was like, Okay, I don't want to say that in the back of my head I was like, I'm gonna get my money's worth on this insurance, but I was like, if something happens, we're covered. So the windshield obviously wasn't our fault, but I do remember we hit Colorado and we were in a parking lot with our friends Eric and Mozzie, and there was this really cool like snow. It wasn't an embankment, but like a lot of snow had formed in the parking lot, and it was like a little snow hill. And I was like, oh, we should like I don't know, hit it with the truck. It'll be fun. And then I think there was something hard underneath or something, and we ended up like busting through it. There wasn't any like major damage, but I think it got some like scuffs or something. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm glad we got the insurance.
We dented the door.
Did we dent the door?
We dented the door.
Okay.
And we cracked the windshield.
Well, okay, again, a cracked windshield wasn't our fault. That was like during just the regular driving. But I definitely think we got $800 worth of damage on it. So sorry about that.
So yes, what can you do to prepare? So Mercury rules software, Mars rules hardware. So updating your software. Definitely.
Wait, how do you come to that?
Because software is really like communication based, right? So like the code talks to each other to make things happen.
Well, code doesn't talk. It's binary.
You know what I'm saying.
Okay.
Code plays off of each other. Like, in a way, it has to talk. It has to say 001 to do the thing,
Yeah,
right? Versus like 10101 is like different.
Okay.
There is communication and programming and thought into software. Hardware is just pieces move and go burr, okay? So, Mercury rules software. So definitely updating all of your software, like when it comes out before Mercury retrograde, or like if it's during Mercury retrograde, like updating it ASAP. Mars rules hardware because Mars rules steel and other metals. So anyway,
Phones aren't even made out of metal anymore. They're like silicone and, well, I guess the casing, but okay.
there you go. So anyway, so that's number one. Number two is...
So, like, okay, so you're saying, like, if there's an iPhone update, if there's, like, a Microsoft update, which I feel it's every 3 days on Microsoft, like, get that all out of the way, right?
Yes, as much as possible. Yep. And then if you have to mail something or email something, like definitely doing it with time, and maybe depending on how important it is, making sure you like get the tracking or checking your outbox and making sure it doesn't get stuck in your outbox via email.
Is it worth paying the little extra for like priority and maybe a signature, do you think? Or is that too much?
Depends on how important the thing is. I'm not sure. That's a question you have to ask yourself. If you're going to travel, making sure you have like as many ducks in a row as possible. Maybe it's worth it to get the travel insurance.
Ooh, let me share a story. It's not mine, and now I'm very curious if this happened during Mercury retrograde. But these two people are going to go unnamed, but they had a trip. They were going out of the country, and they had planned it. They had paid for it. Everything was done. And they were getting ready to go, literally day of, morning of, and I think they were trying to get their ducks in a row, like you said. And at the very last minute, not even the day before or like a week before, the moment they were heading out, one of the two people realized that their passport was expired, and they just could not go on the trip. And I was like, oof, that is rough. So if you're going somewhere that requires documentation, you're saying make sure you have all that checked, double checked, triple checked, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep. If you need to close a deal, like if you can't avoid signing a contract, like instead of just assuming, it'll be fine, really read through the fine print.
So don't go into escrow during retrograde.
I mean, we couldn't avoid it, right? But at the same time, we're not going to stop living our life because of retrograde, or else we would have...
And that's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying too. So, like... You know, I read all whatever it was, 200 pages of our like contract, and in the middle I found a tiny ass line in some tiny ass boxes that said that we had a VA loan instead of an FHA loan, and that could have fucked over this whole process. We could have lost the house. Like,
so if you're in escrow, make sure you read Well, I mean, you should probably be reading the 200-page contract anyways. It's no Harry Potter, but, it's still very important.
I'm gonna be honest. If it wasn't retrograde, I probably would have just signed it.
Like,
Been like,
skimmed it?
it's fine. Yeah,
Ooh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And then hold on. I'm not done yet. Hold on. And then while talking to people, if you know it's retrograde, you kind of have to be like the bigger emotional person and hold space for people. And if people start to get spicy, if there are miscommunications, really just telling yourself like, okay, it's retrograde. They probably didn't mean it. Maybe we'll revisit this conversation at a later time. So holding space for people, unless it's something that has to be like nipped in the bud right now. But yeah, you just, if you know the energy and you know what's going on energetically and the other person doesn't, maybe, yeah, just holding space for those miscommunications and being like, this is typical. I'm sure this will be resolved at a later time.
And I'm not trying to be dismissive at all, but all these things that you mentioned just sound like great life tips in general.
Yeah, they are, but they're even more important during Mercury retrograde.
Got it. Has there ever been a time where you've I guess you've already answered this question, but maybe another example where you've personally done these things and Mercury retrograde still was like, no, fuck your shit, I'm still gonna mess with you? Like, you feel like you've prepared as much as you can, but Mercury said, like, not today?
I'm sure I have. I feel like something probably happened in college where I maybe like missed a deadline and my computer crapped out or something.
To be fair, the computer that Genesis had, because I bought her a new one not too long ago, that thing sounded like you would turn it on and it sounded like it was going to fly off into space. The fans were so freaking loud, and the amount of heat it produced could heat up her home. Like, not even kidding.
It was going to blow up.
So I don't know if that's so much Mercury retrograde as like, girl, buy a laptop. It's like $300.
I don't know. I hadn't bought a laptop in so long. I was under the impression they were like thousands of dollars, but anyway.
Well, MacBooks are, but
yeah. But I had a PC, so that didn't matter. And I still have a PC actually. But yeah, I feel like recently I've been just more prepared. I feel like Mercury hasn't caught me off guard, not to like have it test me right now.
Because we have a lot of fun stuff coming up, so I don't want it to interfere. Let me ask you another question. When did you start taking Mercury retrograde into consideration for your personal life? Because obviously you haven't been doing that since you were like 10. Like, when did you say like, oh, I'm going to actually prepare? Or like, when were you introduced to the concept of Mercury retrograde? And then when did you start taking action? The reason I ask, because again, just in passing and just having superficial conversations with you, I know this is not the first time you've brought up Mercury retrograde. I maybe haven't just listened as well in the past, but I know you've done things to prepare. So when did that start for you?
I feel like I was introduced to the concept around maybe, I want to say 2014, but probably didn't start taking
2014, that's a year before we met.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then I probably didn't. And then I started kind of like tracking and noticing it from then on, but taking it like seriously, probably not until 2018.
But that's pretty recent. What changed?
I feel like I finally was just out of college, out of the rat race, just really had time to like focus on myself. I mean, I would still keep track of the transits for fun, but I wouldn't like do anything about it. But I graduated college in 2017, and then in 2018, when I started working at a Pride Center, it was like a really cool job for the most part in the beginning. And I just was feeling really fulfilled, really good. So I had more time to sort of study. That's when I think, started studying a lot of things.
Because now I know you do prepare for it. Like
yes.
I said, this isn't the first time I've heard you say like Mercury retrograde is coming.
Yeah, 2018 was 5 years ago. So yeah. I would say like I started taking my tarot and astrology journey really seriously, probably, around like 2018-ish.
And then, sorry, you mentioned 5 years ago. We probably got married during Mercury retrograde, didn't we?
I don't know if we did. I'll have to check.
We might have just missed it.
Well, it's not exactly every like 4 months.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would have to go back and check like what were the retrogrades in 2018 to let you know if we got married during a retrograde or not. I don't know off the top of my head.
So just so everybody knows, we got married on December 15th. In case anybody's wondering.
Yeah, so our anniversary is coming up in less than a week. I don't think it was a retrograde, or else I feel like I would have, but honestly, weddings were so chaotic that I feel like I stopped keeping track of like everything except for like our wedding.
For sure.
Yeah. But I since I was younger, so really my astrology journey was like it started as a kid with like Walter Mercado, Univision, Telemundo, just basic like Leo stuff, and then like New Year superstitions. And then in college I started being introduced to like, retrogrades and stuff. And then probably in like 2018, that's when I realized like that there is enough material out there to where it's more feasible to start studying like how things affect you and other people, and like how to read a birth chart and things like that. And then I've just been studying hardcore ever since 2018.
And I think that's great because, like I said, I think some of those practices are just good life skills to have, right? Taking space for people when they're not communicating the best. And it's really cool that this journey has opened you to those practices. Whether I believe or don't believe, the life skills and the patience are a good byproduct of your spiritual journey. So I think that's great, regardless. Cool. I actually learned a lot. Like I said, this is the first time that for me this topic was super blind. Like I had no idea what it was. Maybe I'll start practicing a little bit more because again, I think there's some really great concepts there. Now it is time for listener questions. Thank you so much, first off, for everybody who listened to our last episode. I want to say, me personally, that was my favorite, the aliens episode. We didn't get too many discussion posts. I think we got one. I think that was from Mercy, so thank you, Mercy. But if you want to go back to that one, we'd love to hear your alien stories. I think we talked about that episode, you and I, off the microphone for like a good 2 days afterwards. So thank you so much for listening and sharing with us. So now we're going to go into the listener questions. The first one comes from Waxy Aesthetics. It says, does Mercury retrograde strongly affect Mercury placement? So I have no idea what that means. So go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, I feel like Mercury retrograde affects the macro and the micro. We're all experiencing Mercury retrograde, both in unique ways that are personal to us based on our personal astrology, and then as a collective. So I just remembered that like I believe it was the 2020 election was around during a Mercury retrograde. If I'm not, is that the year we went to Colorado? Yeah. So Mercury retrograde was happening around the election, and then it was the whole like, the ballot machines aren't working and I actually won and blah, blah, blah. So we're all going to experience that. And then in terms of, does Mercury affect your Mercury placements? It depends if there is an aspect. So like I said, because my Mars and my Mercury are basically 90 degrees apart, it creates a square. So yes, it can affect that. So if your Mercury is between 0 degrees or 60 degrees or 90 degrees or 120 or 180, those can create special aspects, good or bad or neutral. So it really just depends on your personal astrology. So if you're ever curious how this is going to affect you, you can always book a session with me, and then I can look through your chart and let you know.
So it affects people differently then, correct?
Yeah, so anything can have a birth chart. I feel like I've probably mentioned this before. So the United States has like one collective energy.
Yes.
So Mercury retrograde can affect the United States. in like a very specific way, and then everyone in the United States is going to feel it a specific way, and then at the same time have shit specific to them happen at the same time.
What about on a like world effect? So is there like a world effect?
Yeah, I mean, if it affects the US, it's probably going to affect other people, right? Like,
I mean, I guess.
unfortunately, I mean, we're in a globalized situation now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I believe it. Yeah, it definitely could. But long story short, yes, it can affect your Mercury placement specifically if it's creating an aspect to your Mercury. Like, I would have to look at your birth chart and then whatever Mercury retrograde you want to know about, whether it's this one or the next one, to tell you if it is or if it isn't. Or, you know, if you want to self-study, it's sort of how I've mentioned before, like, you can do your taxes on your own if you want. Nobody's stopping you. So if you wanted to, there are softwares up there, of course, so many like astrology softwares where you can sort of like play around yourself if you want to self-study. But if not, you can always book a session with me too.
Awesome. The next question comes from Mercy094. Shout out, Mercy. I just had lunch with your brother and we talked about you, so. Can Mercury retrograde have positive effects or only negative ones? And then, are there common misconceptions about Mercury retrograde you find interesting?
Yeah, definitely some Mercury retrogrades, instead of everything going to hell, is sometimes an invitation for you to slow down and reconsider things. Again, it really depends like on how it's affecting your personal astrology and also what sign it's into, I would say. There are definitely some signs that do a little better with Mercury retrograde than others, but I feel like it more is going to depend on your chart specifically. And then again, like, you could pick up some habits because you're trying to prepare for Mercury retrograde that just carry with you, you know, in the long run. Like, I think a positive effect of Mercury retrograde is that we are now homeowners.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't for Mercury retrograde, I wouldn't have combed through all that blah, 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 and found this error. We could have lost our house, and who knows what we would have been doing right now. So,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
And then she asks, are there common misconceptions about Mercury retrograde you find interesting?
Yeah, again, just that everything's gonna go to hell. No, not necessarily. You have the ability to prepare. So we're actually gonna go on vacation after this, and I've already set up sort of like some proofing in place in case things happen. Like, I'm re-upping some travel insurance, and we're going to like print our boarding passes and just some other things that I'm just like, this is how it's gonna happen. Because we are traveling like on a cruise, if we do stuff off the boat, I'm gonna be like, we need to get back 4 hours early during Mercury retrograde. I bet this ship is gonna fucking leave us in another country and we're gonna be screwed.
Gosh. So because we're going on a cruise, a lot of my algorithm is cruise related, and unfortunately a lot of it is people being left behind by the cruise, but that won't happen to us because I'm very punctual. So I would like, the last thing that I think would happen to us is a ship leaving us.
Yeah. And then I'm going to visit some family, and I'm very excited about that. But I did prepare, like, I know that statistically for me, after like 72 hours, things can go sideways. So I'm making sure that we like plan activities in between seeing family too.
Nice. Great. So I think a lot of really good information. Again, this is probably the episode where I learned the most. And it sounds like there's a lot of personalization. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you and possibly get a reading or maybe see how Mercury retrograde affects them, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so you can DM me. My Instagram is Jen Calotero, GenKahloTarot. Or you can email me, tarotwithgenesis@gmail.com. I apologize if I'm like offline for the next week. We will be traveling, but I will try to get back to you sometime when I can look at my phone, but definitely by probably the next episode, I would say.
Perfect. And I'm really excited. Our next episode is astrocartography, and that is a mouthful, but just really, really short. It's the study of planets and their energy on specific locations of the world. So if you have any questions about astrocartography, we'll make the post and go ahead and ask them. Because we're going to be traveling, it's actually, I'm really excited. It's going to be our first road episode. Technically, it's going to be on a ship. So we are going to be recording the podcasts from our cruise ship, and maybe you'll hear some waves in the background.
I will say it will be in true retrograde style that something might happen, and then hopefully the astrocartography episode doesn't get delayed, but in case it is, we're just going to blame it on Mercury Retrograde.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much. That was a great episode.
All right, blessed be, and signing off.
Bye.